Welcome to Information Security and Risk Management in Context. I'm Dr. Barbara Endicott-Popovsky, and I'm your instructor for this quarter. Allow me to go over the course with you a bit and walk you through the lessons that you're going to be experiencing over the next 10 weeks. First, let me level set you about the field you're about to study. The term in the title is information security. In the profession, you're going to hear terms like information assurance and cybersecurity, and often you'll hear these terms used interchangeably. For some of us, information assurance has come to be the term that umbrellas all cybersecurity activities, from high-level policy all the way to working detailed technical problems. And cybersecurity has tended to be the term that is used when you're talking about technical solutions. But truth be told, this field is so new and so in the process of being defined that these terms are not settled. And so when we introduce you to information security over the next 10 weeks, be assured that we've given a lot of thought to what we think the field comprises. What I want for you when you emerge from this class is that you have a serious perspective and global understanding of what all the options are for you personally within this field. Now, I was challenged when I first began to teach about 10 years ago these particular subjects. In fact, we have gone through a tremendous revolution in information security and have had to continually expand the topics that we cover. It's the nature of this particular field. But when I started, knowing that we really didn't have a settled body of knowledge, I was challenged to think through what will I give students as an overview for the field. And so I sat down with two chief information security officers, people who were at the C-level of the executive suites. If you're not familiar with that term, people who are at the top of organizations, the executives that run it, are called C-level executives. You'll hear about a chief executive officer, the person in charge. You'll hear the term chief operating officer, the person who handles the logistics and the operations of a firm. In our field, we have a representative at the top of many organizations called the CISO, or the Chief Information Security Officer. So knowing that we really didn't have a published, agreed to body of knowledge under the title of information security, information assurance, cybersecurity, I did sit down with these two CISOs in the region, and I asked them to keep track over a several-week period of time of all the concerns that they had and they needed to respond to. And it was a huge, huge list. In fact, one man came to lunch with me with a rolled-up parchment that when he unfurled it, it went across a foretop and dangled on either side. Clearly, these folks were juggling an awful lot of topics, but we affinitized them, and you'll see that outcome in this drawing. What we are going to walk you through in this week is this drawing that you're seeing, from policy to procedures that implement policy, to the mechanisms or technologies that implement policy as well. We're going to talk about security awareness training, and by the way, that's an important topic, because unless you tell people what the security program is, unless you educate them why this is important, the human being will always be the weakest link in your security program. And then we'll look at the audit function that provides a feedback mechanism. So this is an overview of the class, and you'll see that it's presented in the context of governance, and that means things like compliance and risk management. So now that we've looked at an overview of the field, and we've talked about how I came about these particular topics for this class, let me go through week by week and talk to you about what topics we're going to cover and what I want you to get out of each one of these lessons. First of all, in week 1, we're going to give you a general orientation to information assurance. I'm going to want you to walk away with the following. You will understand the implications of the emerging and dynamic nature of information assurance. This is not like studying the classics. This field grows as the adversary's creativeness grows, and they keep us on our toes. As we improve our protections of our information systems, they likewise have to raise the game on attacks and exploration of vulnerabilities in those systems and so on. So we have a kind of an arms race. So I want you to understand that when you sign on for this profession, you're also signing on for continuous lifelong learning. This is what makes this field exciting for me. I also want you to be thinking about in that first lesson how you might fit so you can set your intent. You'll be hearing from one of the professionals that I work with who is going to describe his view of the field from a professional perspective and the different lanes that you might take, and be thinking as you listen to that lecture just how you might fit in. When we move on to lesson 2, we'll dive into more of the discipline. First, I'm going to give you an overview, as I said in lesson 1, so that you can start to orient and position yourself as you go through these different lessons. And then in each subsequent lesson, there are certain takeaways that I want you to have. In lesson 1, we're going to be looking at governance, risk management, and compliance, GRC. And we're looking at it from the top. Now, all of you may not want to be Chief Information Security Officers, but just like the MBA is to the CEO, this class is to the CISO. So there are jobs in between. You may not want to be at the top of the organization, but there are many jobs in between, and you need to understand your position in relationship to the whole. So during lesson 2, we're going to define what we mean by IA, and I will elaborate further on the graphic that we showed you about information assurance, and we'll show you how it fits into previous work in the field. I also will want you to walk away with a clear understanding of what the CISO does from a GRC perspective and how IA fits into GRC. So today's organizations are looking at risk as a metric for making decisions. When I began my career, people were concerned about financial decisions, costs, etc. But in today's world, things are moving so fast. We need to make less than perfect decisions, and we need to understand the nature of risk. And this is why governance and risk management have risen to the fore, and why information assurance is very much involved with those practices. Now, moving on to week 3, we're going to dive further into GRC, and we're going to look at laws and regulation and how that manifests in policy. Policy connects an organization to the legal framework in the society in which it operates. And so we want to be able to identify what are the major laws and regulations that a Chief Information Security Officer or an information assurance program in an organization needs to be concerned about. These are laws and regulations that you will have to understand yourselves. Now, we are going to emphasize those laws and regulations that apply to Western countries for the most part, the United States and the United Kingdom, but there are also other laws and contexts that will influence an information assurance, information security program. However, when we look at major companies, they tend to be multinational anyway, and organizations tend to gear themselves to the most stringent legal and regulatory structures that they have to be responsible for. And that just makes sense, because if you gear yourself to the most challenging framework, then you're going to be compliant in all the other regions as well. Now, further, we're going to be able to describe how IA practice implements these laws and regulations, because what you will do in designing an information security plan is you will develop ultimately policies by which the organization will manage their security practices. And we will talk about what it takes to write a good policy. This is an important skill to take away from lesson 3. Now, I'll give you a little example if you're curious. We could, for example, see an organization that has considerable training records that they have to manage and keep track of, but those may not be so sensitive that they warrant being included under the umbrella of a security plan. If that information is leaked, perhaps there's no concern. But if we have an organization that's in the nuclear regulatory field, for example, and these training records are records of someone's certifications in managing nuclear regulatory environments, then that could be considered sensitive. So your policies will reflect decisions like that an organization will make about what to include in their risk management plans and what not. Now, in Lecture 4, we're going to dive more deeply into planning and procedures, and we will be able to have you familiarized with several procedural frameworks that could be the basis for an information assurance plan in any organization that you're working with. We would like you to be competent and comfortable leaving this lesson with the ability to draft an information assurance plan for an organization that you might join and be able to build your own plan for maintaining your currency. As I said before, when you buy into information assurance, you're buying into lifelong learning. So how are you going to keep yourself current with the changes that are going to have to be reflected in your information plans? We're past the time where we write plans and put them on a shelf and let them collect dust. In information assurance, in the cybersecurity field, this is a dynamic process that has to reflect the environment in which we're working, which is constantly changing. Moving on to Lesson 5, we're going to look at technologies, and for some, this comprises what they know about cybersecurity or information assurance. They understand it to be firewalls or intrusion detection systems or antivirus software. By now, you should realize that's only a component of an information assurance program. So in this particular lesson, we're going to talk about the role that technology plays. We'll compare it to the role, and you'll be talking about this later, that human beings play in this process. And then we will describe certain basic technologies you should be familiar with. And then we're going to talk about a concept that is interesting to me from a research perspective, and that's the idea of forensic readiness, that we need to design our systems with the ability to take forensic evidence from these systems in a form that will be survivable in any legal procedure. We'll get into more of that later. In Lesson 6, contrasting with having looked at technologies, we'll be talking about the human factors, vetting people, and security awareness training, because as I said, the human being is your weakest link in any security system. So we're going to want you to be able to describe how those human factors play in any IA plan, and we really want you to understand how a good security awareness training program is put together. There's some excellent guidelines that have come out of NIST, and you'll be familiar with this when you finish this particular lesson. So you will be able to identify the key principles that a good security awareness training program adheres to. In Lesson 7, we get into some specific kinds of plans that a well-run organization will include in their information assurance planning, and that's business continuity, disaster recovery, incident response, and digital forensics. An IA plan assumes all things go well, but we know that they won't. So good organizations do plan for the worst. And so having an ability to continue your business, recover from disaster, collect data from systems so that you could pursue redress in a legal system is all important. So after you get out of this particular lesson, you're going to be able to understand the threat spectrum that's arrayed against our information systems. You'll be able to describe what we mean and what would be included in a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. And then you're going to be able to describe the role of digital forensic in incident response. In our 8th lesson, we're going to get into the feedback mechanisms. This is audit, compliance, and monitoring. And so by the time you finish this lesson, you're going to understand the role of IA audit in a good IA program and how we use feedback from an audit to perfect and improve an information assurance plan. You're going to be able to describe how an audit is conducted, and you're going to be able to integrate monitoring into a good IA program. Again, we're emphasizing the dynamic nature of an information assurance program, that you're constantly seeking feedback and monitoring systems so that you are assured that policy is implemented the way you think it should be, and that the systems that you've put in place, procedures and technologies and training programs, are doing what they're supposed to be doing. In Lesson 9, we look at reporting functions and public relations, which is also an important part of any IA program. In this lesson, you'll be able to walk away with an understanding and an appreciation of how to identify and create an appropriate reporting structure. When is it important that your findings in your IA program go all the way to the top of the organization? When do you need to report to external agencies? When do you need to have a link to public relations in case there is a breach? And I can think of several rather disastrous breaches, and I'm sure you can too, that have occurred in the news, where organizations probably experienced a dramatic impact on the bottom line, on stock prices, as a result of digital breaches. So how do you handle that? What are the public relations steps around that? And finally, you will be able to devise a good reporting and PR plan after you complete this particular lesson. Lesson 10 is the introduction of an interesting new topic that is a big concern for CISOs, and that's security in social media. We're seeing a rampant uptake of digital devices coming into systems. We are seeing employees expecting to have access to Twitter and Facebook and virtual worlds as a means of doing business, staying in touch with their colleagues. And how do you manage security around these devices in an organization? So when you complete this lesson, you're going to have a good comprehension of what's driving the uptake of social media. You'll be able to identify the issues, the security issues, in the use of all of these. And finally, you'll be able to discuss some of the emerging issues that are coming down the road. Again, the field of information assurance is evolving. Technology is evolving, the threats are evolving, and so we're going to be addressing what we see coming at us in the near future. Now, this gives you a summary of the 10 lessons we go through. Going back to the graphic, you can see that we've walked through this graphic and explained each element, and then we've gone into some specialized topics that are exclusive to this particular field. We will be testing your understanding of each of these topics as we go along. There'll be brief assessments that are geared to test your understanding of the objectives in each topic. And then there will be discussion forums that will allow you to engage in meaningful discussions with your other classmates. So I look forward to seeing the results of your discussions, and I know you're going to have a good time in this program.